Okay, so you wanted to understand Tulsi Gabbard,
That's right.
her potential nomination for Director of National Intelligence, and the controversies around her connections to the Science of Identity Foundation.
Uh-huh.
Well, get ready, because we've gone deep into the research for you.
Yeah, we're talking leaked documents, court records, investigative reports, even excerpts from Chris Butler's own lectures.
Really?
Yeah.
It's,
Sounds like quite the rabbit hole.
it really is. This is a story with twists and turns you just won't believe.
Let's start with the Science of Identity Foundation, or SIF. Can you give us some background on exactly what this organization is?
So the Science of Identity Foundation is a secretive religious group.
Okay.
It was founded by Chris Butler.
Mm-hmm.
He's also known by a few other names,
Okay.
including Jagadguru Siddhaswara Paramahamsa.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. They're rooted in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which is a branch of Hinduism, and they operate meditation and yoga centers all over the world. These centers, what role do they play within the organization?
Well, they're more than just places to practice yoga. They often serve as recruitment hubs for SIF, drawing people in with this promise of spiritual enlightenment and community.
Interesting.
A lot of them have Czaitanii or Gauranga in the title,
Okay.
which can make them pretty tough to track.
So it sounds like they're not exactly upfront about their affiliation with SIF.
No, not really. They often operate under all sorts of different names, making it hard to trace their activities back to the main organization.
Okay.
And this lack of transparency, well, it's definitely raised some red flags.
I can see why. And within this organization, what's the power structure like?
SIF has a very strict hierarchical structure,
Okay.
with Chris Butler right at the top.
Right at the top.
Then come his senior disciples, followed by regular disciples, and then, the new members.
I see.
And your position in this pyramid, well, it determines your access to Butler's teachings and how much influence you have within the group.
As we were going through these leaked documents, I was really struck by the language that Chris Butler uses, especially some of the quotes where he just berates and insults his followers.
Yeah.
How does that kind of behavior fit into the picture of SIF's leadership?
Yeah, those quotes are really disturbing. I mean, from what we can gather, Butler's leadership style is very authoritarian.
Really?
Yeah, he demands absolute obedience from his followers and seems to exert a lot of control over their lives.
Wow.
And former members have described an environment of, fear and intimidation, where you just can't question Butler's authority.
One quote that really stuck with me was, "What? Just because you come here and clean my floor and wash my dishes, eat my toenails and drink my foot water, you think you have the right to talk to me, write me a letter? A-hole."
Yeah.
I mean, that's some pretty intense language.
It's really not what you expect from a spiritual leader, is it?
No, not at all.
These leaked documents, they paint a very different picture of Butler than the one he presents publicly.
It does sound that way.
They reveal this volatile personality and a tendency towards controlling behavior, which raises concerns about the potential for abuse within SIF.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how does the Gabbard family fit into all of this?
Well, Mike and Carol Gabbard, Tulsi's parents, they became followers of Butler way back in the early days of SIF.
Really?
Yeah, they were deeply involved in the organization for decades. Mike Gabbard especially was super involved in anti-LGBTQ plus activism in Hawaii in the 1990s.
Okay.
A lot of people think those views were directly influenced by Butler's teachings.
That connection between Mike Gabbard's political activities and SIF's beliefs really raises questions about the organization's reach. Like, how far does their influence go?
Yeah, it certainly does. And it's not just about his political activities.
Right.
Campaign finance records actually show that Mike Gabbard received significant donations from SIF members. Even though he later tried to distance himself from the organization and claimed to be Catholic, this suggests a much deeper level of involvement than he's publicly acknowledged.
And what about Tulsi Gabbard? What's her connection to SIF and Chris Butler?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard's connection is a little harder to pin down.
Okay.
While she's never actually admitted to being a member of SIF, she has referred to Chris Butler as her Guru Dev in the past.
Guru Dev.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
This term, Guru Dev, it signifies a deep level of respect and spiritual guidance in Hinduism.
Okay.
And while she has, distanced herself from Butler in recent years, her past statements and actions suggest a closer relationship than she's willing to admit now.
Given her potential nomination for Director of National Intelligence, I mean, how does this connection to SIF raise concerns?
Well, the DNI is a powerful position, one of the most powerful positions in the U.S. government.
Right.
They oversee the entire intelligence community and advise the president on national security. So if Tulsi Gabbard gets appointed to this position, her past ties to SIF and Chris Butler could raise some serious concerns, like potential conflicts of interest and undue influence.
Can you elaborate on what those potential conflicts of interest might be?
Sure. For example, former members of SIF, they've accused the group of being a cult.
Yeah.
They allege that Butler uses these manipulative tactics to control his followers, demands absolute loyalty, and isolates them from the outside world.
Wow.
Some even say that they fear repercussions for speaking out against the group or Butler.
That's intense.
It is. And if these allegations are true, then it raises questions about Gabbard's judgment and whether her loyalty to Butler could compromise her ability to act in the best interests of the country.
So there's a possibility that she might prioritize the interests of SIF over the interests of the United States.
Yeah, that's the concern. And it's not just about loyalty. There are also concerns about the potential for SIF to, exert influence on Gabbard's decision-making.
You know, if she's indebted to Butler or fears repercussions from the group, it could compromise her objectivity and independence as DNI.
These leaked documents also mention something called prasadam.
Yeah.
It seems to be related to food and money, but I wasn't totally clear on the context.
Okay.
Can you explain what prasadam is and why it's significant in this story?
Prasadam is a Sanskrit word. It refers to food that's been offered to a deity in Hinduism.
Okay.
It's considered sacred and often shared among devotees as like a blessing.
I see.
But in the context of SIF, former members allege that Butler uses prasadam as a way to control his followers.
Really?
Like they say he often berates them for not preparing food to his liking, and he uses it as a way to exert his authority and demand obedience.
So something that's supposed to be a symbol of spiritual devotion is allegedly being used as a means of control.
That's right. And it goes beyond just the food.
Former members have said that Butler demands absolute control over their finances and that they're expected to donate big chunks of their income to SIF.
This all sounds very troubling.
Yeah.
And the financial aspect of SIF seems to go even deeper. You mentioned earlier that they're connected to a vegetarian grocery chain in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
SIF has these significant financial ties to Healthy's Inc. It's the parent company of Down to Earth, the vegetarian grocery chain.
Oh, wow.
They've made a lot of money from selling Healthy's Inc. stock.
Really?
Yeah. Which raises some big questions about how a seemingly spiritual organization like this amassed so much wealth. And what are they doing with all that money?
It does make you wonder. It seems like we've only scratched the surface of SIF's financial dealings. And you mentioned a possible connection to a multi-level marketing company called QNet.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that connection and why it's relevant to our deep dive?
Well, QNet's a pretty controversial company. It's a multi-level marketing company that has faced legal issues and accusations of running a pyramid scheme. What's interesting is that QNet's founders, Vijay Aswaran and Joseph Bismarck, they have connections to SIF. Bismarck, he's a longtime devotee of Chris Butler. He's even listed, get this, the Science of Identity University as part of his education.
Wow. So we've got a religious organization with ties to a company accused of shady business practices. How does this all connect back to Tulsi Gabbard and her potential nomination?
It raises concerns about the potential for financial entanglement and the flow of money between all these organizations. And while there's no direct evidence linking Gabbard to QNet, it just adds another layer of complexity to this whole story and really highlights the need for transparency about her past affiliations and any potential conflicts of interest.
This is a lot to take in. We've got this secretive group, a controversial leader, a powerful family with deep ties, and some questionable financial dealings. Where do we go from here? What else do we need to understand about SIF and Tulsi Gabbard's relationship with them?
Yeah, to fully grasp the potential implications of Gabbard's nomination, we need to really look at the specific allegations made by former SIF members.
Yeah.
They claim the organization uses these cult-like tactics to control its followers.
Right.
And that Butler's influence, it extends far beyond spiritual matters. We also need to dig deeper into SIF's finances, particularly their connections to Healthy's Inc. and QNet, to really understand the extent of their financial power and influence.
This deep dive into Tulsi Gabbard, SIF, and Chris Butler, it's turning out to be quite the tangled web.
Oh, it is.
Stay with us as we continue to untangle this story and explore the potential consequences of her nomination for the future of U.S. intelligence.
It's going to be wild. What's so interesting here is how SIF has just flown under the radar for so long, despite having these big political and financial connections.
Right.
It really makes you wonder how many other groups out there might be operating the same way,
Yeah.
pulling strings behind the scenes.
It's like they've created this veil of secrecy around themselves. And that just makes it harder to really assess the potential risks of Tulsi Gabbard's nomination. If she's confirmed as DNI,
right,
can she truly separate her personal beliefs from her role as, the top intelligence official?
Right.
Can we really be confident that her decisions will be based on national security interests and not the agenda of this secretive group?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
And it's one that deserves some serious consideration. I mean, Gabbard supporters say her past with SIF is irrelevant.
Correct.
They say that her experience in Congress and her military service shows she's committed to serving the country.
But her critics argue that her ties to SIF raise some pretty serious concerns about her judgment, her susceptibility to influence, and her commitment to transparency.
Exactly. And these concerns, well, they're made worse by the fact that the DNI has access to some of the most sensitive information in the government.
Right.
Information that could be used to help or hurt people or organizations.
In the allegations about SIF trying to, cover up Gabbard's past and influence media coverage, there are some very valid concerns about how that information might be used if she becomes DNI.
That potential for conflict of interest, it's really troubling in the context of the intelligence community, where trust and integrity are just so crucial. I mean, the DNI's role is to make sure that intelligence agencies are working effectively and ethically.
Yeah.
If there's even a hint of impropriety or bias, it could undermine the entire system.
Absolutely. And that's why this nomination has caused so much debate. The stakes are super high.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about one person's career here. We're talking about the security of the whole country.
So how do we weigh these different perspectives? How do we determine whether Gabbard's past ties to SIF should disqualify her from being DNI?
That's tough. There's no easy answer.
Right.
It takes careful consideration of the evidence, a thorough vetting process.
And a willingness to really talk openly and honestly about the risks and the benefits of her nomination. I mean, it's not enough to just brush aside these concerns about SIF or to blindly trust that Gabbard will always act in the best interests of the country. We need to demand transparency and accountability from our leaders, especially those who have so much power.
And this scrutiny should extend beyond just Gabbard herself. We should also be looking at the influence of SIF as an organization. What are their goals? How do they operate? What kind of impact are they having on our political system?
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that SIF isn't just some small fringe group.
Yeah.
They have this global network of centers, significant financial resources, and a history of political involvement. Their influence goes way beyond just spirituality.
And as we've seen with the Gabbard family, that influence can reach into the highest levels of government.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to shed light on this organization. We need to understand how they work, what they want, and how they might be using their influence to shape political outcomes.
One thing that really stood out to me when we were researching SIF was how little information is out there about them.
Right.
It's like they're deliberately operating in secret. Their websites don't say much about what they believe or do.
Yeah.
And their finances, well, they're hidden behind all these layers of corporations. It's really hard to get a clear picture of who they are and what they're all about.
That lack of transparency is a huge red flag in my book.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what they're trying to hide. Why are they so secretive about how they operate? And this just makes it even more difficult to figure out the risks of Gabbard's nomination.
It's like we're trying to put together a puzzle with only half the pieces. We have these glimpses into what SIF is doing, their political donations, their connection to QNet, what former members have said.
Right.
But it's hard to get a full understanding of their influence and what motivates them.
And that lack of understanding makes it even tougher to figure out the consequences of Gabbard's nomination. I mean, if we don't have the full picture of SIF's agenda and how it might affect her as DNI, how can we make a good decision about whether she's the right person for the job?
It feels like we're being asked to just trust her judgment without having all the information.
Right.
And that's not very comforting.
Especially with all the power the DNI has.
Exactly.
Transparency and accountability are absolutely essential in a democracy, especially when it comes to powerful positions.
Yeah.
If Gabbard wants to earn the trust of the American people and the Senate, she needs to be more open about her past with SIF and address the concerns that people have. Just dodging these questions and getting vague answers about her spiritual journey isn't good enough.
It's like her silence is speaking volumes.
It really is. It raises way more questions than it answers. And it just reinforces the need for a thorough and impartial investigation by the Senate. They need to really dig into her relationship with SIF, look into those allegations of cult-like behavior, and assess the potential for conflicts of interest if she becomes DNI.
This whole nomination process is going to be a wild ride.
Oh, yeah.
With so much on the line, the Senate can't afford to rush through this. They need to take their time, carefully consider everything, and make a smart decision based on facts, not politics.
Absolutely. I totally agree. The future of U.S. intelligence could depend on it.
This deep dive into Tulsi Gabbard and the Science of Identity Foundation has uncovered this really complex web of connections.
Yeah.
Raising serious concerns about conflicts of interest and the influence of these secretive groups. It's a story that demands more investigation and a real commitment to transparency from people who want to hold positions of power. We've heard a lot about the concerns around Tulsi Gabbard's potential nomination and her connection to the Science of Identity Foundation.
Right.
But some people might be thinking, why should we even care about someone's religious beliefs, especially when it comes to politics?
That's a fair question. It's important to remember that, freedom of religion is a fundamental right in the United States.
Exactly.
But this situation goes beyond just someone's personal beliefs.
Right.
The concerns around Gabbard's nomination come from the allegations of SIF's cult-like behavior, their potential to exert undue influence, and the fact that they're so secretive about everything they do.
So it's not about judging her faith.
No.
But more about, how those beliefs might affect her ability to do the job of DNI.
Exactly. The DNI has a huge impact on national security policy. It's vital that whoever is in that position can make objective decisions based on facts and intelligence, free from any outside pressure or bias.
And the concern here is that her past ties to SIF and Chris Butler could, cloud her judgment.
Yeah, that's the main issue. I mean, the stories from former SIF members paint a pretty disturbing picture. They talk about an organization that controls its followers, demands total loyalty, and operates in secrecy. All this raises serious questions about whether Gabbard could truly separate herself from all of that if she were DNI.
We've also talked about those concerns about SIF's finances and their ties to QNet. How do those financial ties play into all this?
Well, that potential for financial entanglement between SIF, Healthies, Inc., and QNet, it adds another layer of concern.
Right.
It raises questions about where the money is going between these organizations and whether those financial connections could be used to pressure or influence people.
So it's not just about ideology, but also the potential for, financial leverage.
Exactly. When you consider the allegations of cult-like behavior and then you add in these complicated financial dealings, well, the potential for conflicts of interest becomes pretty significant.
Yeah, I see that.
And those conflicts could have some serious implications for national security if Gabbard were to become DNI.
This is all so murky. What can be done to address these concerns? How can we make sure this nomination process is fair and transparent?
Well, the Senate has a responsibility to investigate Gabbard's background and her relationship with SIF. I mean, a real investigation.
Yeah.
They need to look into the details of these allegations, examine those financial ties, and get some straight answers from Gabbard herself.
So it's not enough for her to just deny the allegations.
Right.
Or, say some vague things about her past.
Exactly. The American people deserve transparency, especially from someone who wants such a powerful position. The Senate needs to ask the hard questions, see the evidence, and really weigh the risks before making a decision.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening.
It has.
It shows how someone's personal beliefs, political goals, and national security can all get tangled up.
It's complicated.
What are the key takeaways here for our listeners?
I think the most important thing is to be vigilant.
Okay.
We need to be aware of how people and groups can influence our political system.
Yeah.
Even groups that seem small or harmless at first glance.
Right.
We need to demand transparency from our leaders and hold them accountable for what they do and who they're connected to.
It really highlights how something as personal as faith can have a huge impact when it comes to positions of power. It reminds us that we can't afford to be complacent about these potential conflicts of interest and how important it is to protect the integrity of our institutions.
Absolutely. This deep dive into Tulsi Gabbard and the Science of Identity Foundation, it's been a journey into a world of secrets, power, and how religious freedom works in a democracy. It's a story that leaves us with more questions than answers, the sense of unease, and honestly, a call to action. We hope you continue to explore this, seek out different viewpoints, and engage in meaningful conversations about what we've discussed.
Well said. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into a truly fascinating and unsettling topic.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
And remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay engaged, and always keep asking those tough questions.